Hey everybody, welcome back to Up the Vibe. And today I have the pleasure of speaking to Paul Wallis, best-selling author of the Eden series, which probes ancestral narratives and human origins. He also has many interviews and documentaries on the Paul Wallis YouTube channel and the Fifth Kind TV. Hi Paul, how are you doing?
Good day, Joe. I'm fantastic, thanks. And thank you for having me on your show.
No, it's a great pleasure, and it's amazing that we've managed to sort this out with the time difference and everything. Good to have you on.
It's a challenge.
Yeah. What drove you to do the Eden series? What kind of spurred you on?
I'd been provoked somewhat into doing it because a massive gauntlet was thrown down by the Roman Catholic Church in 2009 when Pope Benedict XVI, the most conservative pope in my lifetime, called upon the Pontifical Academy of Sciences to hold what they called a colloquium. So this was a symposium of top scholars, top theologians to discuss, and they made it public what they were discussing, the theological implications of contact with other civilizations. Mm-hmm. Well, when they published that, I could have fallen off my seat because it was only 400 years ago. The same institution was burning people alive for merely suggesting there might be intelligent life on other planets, let alone us being in contact with them. And following the colloquium, we heard from very senior spokespeople for the Curia saying there's no theological issue here. A populated universe simply means the creator has been busier than we were aware. We should be ready to embrace a brother or sister alien. This was the language they used. And then Reverend Dr. Guy Consolmagno, who was the chief astronomer for the Vatican Observatory, said we shouldn't be surprised to make contact with other civilizations because, after all, he said they are in the Bible. They're in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And when he said that, it really was a challenge to believers, certainly to theologians around the world, to go back to the Bible and test that. Are there aliens in the Bible? And when I heard that, I thought, could I really have missed something as glaring as aliens in the Bible? So it was on my agenda that when I had the time, I was going to go back and check that out. I had a notion there may be an anomalous entity here and there washing around in the text of the Bible, but what I found through my translation work absolutely blew me away. It was like Neo taking the red pill in the Matrix. It opened up a completely different world, and there's no way you can turn back.
Yeah, I've been through a similar journey in the last few years. It is taking the red pill. I think it's a good analogy. But I think, if I'm right in saying, you actually had an accident in a Frisbee accident or something that caused you to have a bit of time to do a bit more research. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. In Escaping from Eden, which is the first in the Eden series, I talk about this ultimate Frisbee injury where I was in a portable traction device for weeks on end, and it gave me the opportunity of time to study. Now, between you and me, don't tell anybody, I really was injured in an ultimate Frisbee accident, but I used that motif as kind of a metaphor for all the time that the universe has gifted with me at different moments to drill down into these questions that had caught my attention. And it really was a gift, because if I say to other priests or pastors, people who've studied theology, are you aware that the biblical stories, many of which we tell as stories of God, are based on the Mesopotamian stories? They'll often say, oh, yes, I remember that from my training. And are you aware that the Mesopotamian stories are not stories about God? They're stories about other entities, sky people. Yes, I think I remember that. And would it be fair to say that the modern word for sky people is extraterrestrial? Well, I suppose you could say that. And what are the implications of our God stories being based on our ancestors' stories of ETs? Well, I haven't really put much thought to it. Is usually the last answer, and haven't put much thought to it because most pastors, priests are as overscheduled as anybody else. And even if they spot these anomalies or notice these possibilities, they just don't have the time and the luxury to explore them, especially when there's a certain pressure on most pastors and priests to get their head together once again by Sunday morning so they can preach a sermon which rehearses the familiar stories that the congregation expects to hear. I was very fortunate to be in between congregations where I wasn't under that pressure, where I could just follow the data think through the implications, have the time to join the dots. So it was a gift to me because it was long overdue that I should sit down with these texts and ask what is really going on, because the anomalies are obvious. A child can point them out reading through the book of Genesis. And it was to my shame, really. It took me so many years and so many decades to do the work and recognize the other story.
Do you think, to a certain extent, maybe the material that you wrote or the transition that you went through was somehow channeled or influenced from another presence, another ET, a higher self, potentially?
I wondered that because it was a really intense period of unlearning, reframing, relearning, and it was an accelerated period of study and change. Looking back, I can see some things that moved me into this phase of study and change. And I think significantly, I was depressurizing from a really demanding assignment. And I was taking a few months to prioritize my health, just to get my peace back, get my health up to 100%. And so I was taking time to do a lot of grounding, earthing, sunning, deep breathing, getting out into the bush, walking alone in the forest, just reconnecting with the environment around me. And I think that was very significant to what followed, the study that followed and the writing that followed. It was kind of a recalibration. Now that I've written Escaping, The Scars of Eden, and Echoes of Eden, what's happened is I've paid more attention to the world's ancestral narratives, and they interweave the themes of paleo-contact with higher human potential, higher cognitive abilities, and their notion of contact is a little bit more diverse than, if I say a close encounter, we straight away think of, yes, flying saucer lands, small gray gets out and has a conversation. But ancestral narratives do talk about that kind of contact, but they also talk about contact that you could miss, where you're getting these nudges, thoughts, synchronicities, where you're getting help from an invisible cloud of helpers. That's sort of the indigenous worldview. If you sit down with a traditional healer, that's the world they'll describe to you. They will say, Joe, when you come for healing, I can see a little cloud of invisible helpers with you. They're the spirits, they're the ancestral spirits, and they're talking to me about you. All around the world, that's the kind of thought world that the curators of indigenous knowledge live in. Now I look back on that period and think, yes, I think I had my invisible support cloud helping me through the unlearning, the study, the relearning, the writing, because there were so many synchronicities that made it happen. The middle of the three, The Scars of Eden, it almost felt like the book was writing itself, because so many of these synchronicities were following one from the other and enabling me to delve into that territory. So the short version of that answer is yes.